Someone once said, family is where you're safe. But that night, in the backyard, strung with fairy lights, I was shoved to the ground while relatives laughed and chatted. He thought no one would dare act. He didn't see the silver-haired woman by the window tilt her head and signal. He didn't notice the stranger sitting beside Grandma, someone whose mere gesture could silence the entire party. And when the handcuffs clicked amid clinking plates, I looked him straight in the eye and said, I've been waiting 10 years for this moment. My name is Lena Hart, and I learned early that small towns like Havenbrook, Illinois, have their own rules about family. Rules that say you smile at reunions, hug the relatives you see twice a year, and never ever air dirty laundry in public. At 34, working as a risk compliance specialist at Northline Children's Health Consortium, I'd built my life around rules that actually made sense. Documentation, evidence, clear boundaries. Everything my family pretended didn't matter. The trouble started when my mother, Diane, married Cliff Raw 5 years ago. On paper, he looked perfect. He owned a contracting business, volunteered at the VFW, always had a firm handshake, and a story about supporting local veterans. The kind of man Havenbrook approved of. The kind who knew exactly how to play the loving stepfather in public while systematically dismantling my dignity in private. Lena's always been difficult, he'd say at family dinners, laughing as if we shared an inside joke. Thank God Diane has me to help straighten things out. The relatives would chuckle, my mother would beam, and I'd grip my fork until my knuckles went white. Because pointing out that I'd been living independently since college, that I had a career and a life that needed no straightening, would make me the problem. The ungrateful daughter who couldn't accept her mother's happiness. His son, Cole, was a different story entirely. 28, unemployed, and somehow always launching another business venture that required funding. Where I was difficult, Cole was entrepreneurial. Where I was ungrateful, he was simply a dreamer. Cole was family-oriented, the golden child who could do no wrong, especially when it came to needing money for his latest scheme. My grandmother, Evelyn Hart, watched it all from her wingback chair at these gatherings. 91 years old, sharp as a surgical knife, holder of the family trust, and keeper of our history. She'd built her fortune through decades of careful investment after my grandfather died, turning a modest inheritance into something substantial, something Cliff had been circling like a vulture since the day he married my mother. Family takes care of family, Cliff would say, usually when Cole needed another loan. That's what Evelyn would want. He'd pat my grandmother's shoulder, speak a little louder, as if she couldn't hear perfectly well, and make decisions on her behalf, as if her age had somehow transferred power of attorney to him by default. The rest of the family played along. My aunts and uncles, my cousins, they all chose the path of least resistance. Don't make waves. Don't cause drama. Poor Evelyn's getting frail. And wasn't it wonderful that Diane had found someone to help manage things? Never mind that Grandma still balanced her own checkbook, still called her investment advisor weekly, still caught every discrepancy in her statements. His isolating her, I told my cousin Janet once, after Cliff had rearranged Grandma's doctor's appointment without telling anyone, claiming the original time didn't work for his schedule. Janet had looked uncomfortable, glancing around the restaurant like someone might overhear. Lena, he's trying to help, Janet had said. Not everyone processes family dynamics the way you do. Maybe try being more flexible. Flexible. That was the word everyone used when they meant stop making us uncomfortable with the truth star. I'd made myself a promise after my divorce 3 years ago, never again would I let anyone chip away at my dignity, my autonomy, my sense of self. But keeping that promise in the face of family politics was like trying to hold water in my hands. Every gathering, every holiday, every casual Sunday dinner became a masterclass in subtle humiliation. Lena's too rigid, Cliff would announce. That's why her marriage failed. Lena's too focused on her career. No wonder she doesn't have kids. Lena questions everything, Cliff would add. Some people just can't trust family. And my mother would nod along, lost in the narrative of her perfect second chance at love. The relatives would shift in their seats, but say nothing, and Grandma would watch me with those sharp eyes, occasionally reaching over to squeeze my hand when no one was looking. I knew something had to change. But in Havenbrook, in the Hart family, change required more than just speaking up. It required proof, evidence, the kind of documentation that would make it impossible for anyone to look away. Little did I know that my professional skills in risk compliance were about to become very, very personal. The pattern established itself slowly, like water wearing away stone. After Mom's wedding to Cliff, every family decision somehow required his approval, even Grandma's investment meetings. Cliff insisted he needed to be there for support. Cliff handled the contractors for the family cabin's maintenance. He also oversaw my mother's own retirement planning. "Don't worry, honey," Cliff would assure Diane. "I've got it covered." I remember the first time he crossed a physical line. It was Thanksgiving, 2 years into their marriage. I'd questioned why Cole needed another business loan from Grandma's trust, his third that year. The conversation happened in the garage as I was leaving, away from the others. Cliff cornered me between my car and the wall, his contractor's hands gripping my shoulders. "You need to learn your place," he said, then shoved me hard against the driver's door. The handle dug into my spine. This family operated just fine before you started stirring things up. I could have called the police. Should have. But when I stumbled back inside, shaking, my mother took one look at us and chose her side. "Lena, why do you always have to push him? He's trying so hard to be part of this family." So, I drove home with bruises blooming across my back and a clear understanding. I was alone in this. The financial manipulation was subtler, but no less calculated. Cliff had inserted himself as the unofficial family treasurer, the one who helped Grandma with her correspondence, who organized her bills, who simplified her investment statements so she wouldn't be overwhelmed. He'd show up at her house with pre-written checks for her to sign, just routine bills. "Evelyn, nothing to worry about," he'd say. Cole's lifestyle, meanwhile, grew increasingly lavish. The struggling entrepreneur suddenly had a new truck, top-of-the-line gaming equipment, expensive watches. His social media was filled with posts about grinding and building an empire, always tagged at upscale restaurants and exclusive venues. "Investors believe in my vision," he'd say when anyone asked. But I knew Grandma's trust was the only investor bankrolling his delusions. The family's willful blindness felt like another form of betrayal. At Easter dinner, when Cliff interrupted Grandma mid-sentence to explain what she meant, my Aunt Patricia just smiled nervously when he answered questions directed at her, speaking louder and slower as if she were a child. Uncle Robert studied his plate when he started keeping her financial documents at his house for safekeeping. My cousins found urgent reasons to leave early. "She's lucky to have someone looking out for her," became the family refrain. As if a woman who'd run her own finances for 7 decades suddenly needed a self-appointed guardian. I started documenting everything. Every dismissive comment, every financial irregularity I could spot. Every time Cliff physically intimidated me, always when no one was watching, always careful not to leave visible marks. I took photos of Grandma's signatures on birthday cards from years past, comparing them to the shaky scrolls on recent documents. I screenshot Cole's social media posts, matching dates to large withdrawals from Grandma's accounts. "You're being paranoid," my mother said when I tried showing her my concerns. "Cliff handles everything because he cares. Why can't you just be grateful?" Grateful. That word followed me like a shadow. Grateful that my stepfather controlled my grandmother's money. Grateful that he'd made me unwelcome in my own family. Grateful that he'd turned my mother into someone I barely recognized. A woman who now parroted his opinions, who apologized for my difficult personality to anyone who'd listen. The breaking point came at last summer's reunion. Cliff had taken to calling them his family gatherings, as if marrying my mother had transferred ownership of our entire lineage. He'd pulled me aside during setup, gripping my arm hard enough to leave fingerprints. Evelyn's updating her will, he said quietly. Cole's been such a help to her lately, unlike some people who only show up to cause trouble. The threat was clear: fall in line or be written out entirely, not just from the money. I didn't care about that, but from my grandmother's life, from the family that was already half convinced I was the problem. That night, I made a decision. I wouldn't let him win. I wouldn't let him steal from my grandmother, or erase me from my own family. But I'd learned that words weren't enough in Havenbrook. I needed proof. I needed allies. I needed a plan that would expose Cliff for what he was. Not with accusations that could be dismissed, but with evidence that couldn't be ignored. The compliance specialist in me knew exactly where to start. Paper trails don't lie, even when families do. Working in risk compliance at Northline Children's Health Consortium taught me that fraud leaves fingerprints. Every falsified document, every unauthorized transaction, every forged signature tells a story if you know how to read it. As I processed vendor contracts and audit reports at work, I couldn't stop thinking about those shaky signatures on Grandma's checks. The revelation came during a routine training on financial irregularities. Our instructor showed examples of signature forgeries, how they often showed hesitation marks, unnatural pen pressure, telling inconsistencies in letter formation. I stared at the presentation, my mind racing back to the authorization forms Cliff had been having Grandma sign. That evening, I drove to Grandma's house unannounced. Cliff's truck wasn't there. Poker night with his VFW buddies. I found her in the living room reading her investment portfolio summary. "Grandma, can I see the checks you signed this week?" She looked up, those sharp eyes studying me. "They are in Cliff's filing system. He says it's more organized that way. And the authorization forms for the trust withdrawals. Same place. He brought them by yesterday. Something about Cole's consulting firm needing operating capital." I pulled out my phone and showed her a photo I'd taken at last year's birthday dinner. Her signature on my card, strong and flowing despite her age. Then I showed her a screenshot from Cole's Instagram. Him posing with a new Rolex captioned, "Success is the best revenge." #Hatch #entrepreneur life. Hatch invested. I pressed. "Grandma, the signatures on those recent forms. Did you sign them yourself?" She was quiet for a long moment. "My hand shakes more these days." "Cliff's been helping steady it," she murmured. "Helping." There it was. I spent the next weeks leveraging every skill I'd learned at Northline. I reached out to Mara Quinn, my law school friend, who'd become a civil litigation attorney. We'd stayed close since our University of Chicago days, and she'd just started her own practice. Quinn and older, specializing in financial fraud and elder protection. "Jesus, Lena," Mara said, reviewing my documentation. "This is textbook financial exploitation, but we need more than suspicions." That's when I brought in Theo Briggs, a forensic accountant who did freelance work for various firms. Quiet, methodical, and absolutely brilliant at following money trails. I'd hired him through Northline for a vendor audit once, and he'd uncovered a 3-year embezzlement scheme everyone else had missed. Together, we built our case. Mara filed formal requests for Grandma's financial records, ostensibly for tax planning purposes. At Grandma's request, Theo traced the trust withdrawals, mapping how money flowed from Grandma's accounts through Cole's consulting firm to his personal expenses. I compared signatures, documented conversations, gathered evidence. The pattern was damning. In 2 years, nearly $400,000 had been siphoned off through various schemes. Cole's consulting firm had no actual clients, no business registration, no tax filings. The signatures on the authorization forms showed clear signs of guided signing, someone holding and directing a hand, not their own. "We can file charges now," Mara said. "But he'll claim Evelyn consented to everything." "It'll be he said," she said. That's when Grandma surprised us all. "I'm not as fragile as everyone thinks," she said during one of our strategy meetings. "I've been recording things in my own way." She produced a leather journal filled with dated entries in her careful handwriting, detailing every pressured signing, every time Cliff had helped with her finances, every withdrawal she'd questioned only to be told not to worry. She'd even noted which documents she'd signed willingly versus under pressure. "I was waiting," she said simply, "for someone to believe me." My throat tightened. All this time, while the family painted her as declining, she'd been documenting her own exploitation. "Why didn't you say something?" She smiled sadly. "To whom?" "Your mother thinks Cliff walks on water. The others don't want drama. But you kept fighting even when everyone told you to stop. I knew if anyone would see the truth, it would be you." We adjusted our strategy. The August family reunion at Aunt Patricia's farm would be our moment. Grandma would invite Lieutenant Valerie Knox, her neighbor, who happened to be a police officer. As her +1, I'd present the evidence publicly, forcing the family to see what they'd been ignoring. "He'll react badly," Mara warned. "Men like Cliff don't handle public humiliation well." "I'm counting on it," I said, touching the record app on my phone. "Let him show everyone who he really is." The trap was set. Now we just had to wait for the reunion and for Cliff to walk right into it. The weeks leading up to the reunion required careful orchestration. Mara drew up papers for an emergency protective order, ready to file the moment we had documented proof of physical threat or violence. Theo prepared a comprehensive financial report with charts that even the most willfully blind relative couldn't misinterpret. And I practiced in front of mirrors, in my car, in the shower, keeping my voice steady while delivering devastating truths. Grandma played her part perfectly. When Cliff mentioned updating her will again, she nodded agreeably. After the reunion, she said, "I want all the family there when I make changes. It's only fair." His eyes had lit up with greed. Of course, he'd want witnesses to what he assumed would be Cole's windfall. Lieutenant Valerie Knox proved to be an unexpected ally, a 20-year veteran of the force. She'd lived next door to Grandma for a decade and had her own suspicions about Cliff. "I've seen this too many times," she told us during our planning meeting. "Financial abuse hidden behind family loyalty," Lieutenant Knox said. "I'll be there, but I can only act if I witness something actionable." "He's careful," I warned. "He only gets physical when no one's watching." Lieutenant Knox smiled grimly. "Men like that get sloppy when they think they are winning. And from what you've told me, he thinks he's about to win big." I invested in a high-quality recording device disguised as a phone case. Illinois is a two-party consent state, but I'd be recording myself and any threats made directly to me. Mara researched every legal precedent, ensuring our approach was bulletproof. Theo created presentation materials that could be displayed on Aunt Patricia's outdoor projection system, supposedly for sharing family memories. The hardest part was maintaining normalcy. At work, I processed compliance reports and investigated vendor irregularities while my mind churned through contingencies. What if Cliff didn't take the bait? What if the family turned on me entirely? What if Mom never forgave me? But then I'd remember Grandma's journal, her careful documentation of her own exploitation, and my resolve would harden. This wasn't just about money, or even justice. It was about proving that truth mattered more than comfortable lies. Cole predictably began dropping hints about his major expansion plans on social media, pictures of commercial real estate listings, posts about generational wealth, cryptic references to family support. He even messaged me directly. "Hope you're ready for big changes cause some of us are moving up in the world," he messaged. I saved every message, every post, every piece of evidence that showed consciousness of guilt. 3 days before the reunion, Cliff cornered me at the grocery store. "No witnesses in the cereal aisle." "I know what you're doing," he hissed, grabbing my wrist. "All your questions. You're snooping around. You're trying to poison Evelyn against us." I kept my voice calm, aware of the recording device. "I'm trying to protect my grandmother." His grip tightened. "You have no idea who you're messing with." "I've worked too hard to let some uptight little," he cut himself off, "ruin everything. Back off, or you'll regret it." "Is that a threat, Cliff?" He leaned closer, his breath hot with coffee and menace. "It's a promise. After the reunion, after the will's updated, you're going to find yourself very unwelcome in this family. Your mother already knows you're unstable. It won't take much to convince everyone else." I pulled my wrist free, my heart hammering but my voice steady. "We'll see about that." He stormed off, leaving me shaking in the breakfast food section, but I had what I needed, a clear threat recorded and time-stamped. That night, Grandma called. "Lena, dear, I wanted to go over the plan once more." We talked for an hour, strategizing like generals before a battle. She'd already transferred copies of key documents to her safety deposit box with Mara listed as having access. She'd spoken privately with her investment advisor, flagging any unusual activity. She'd even written letters to each family member to be opened when the time was right. "Are you sure about this, Grandma?" I asked. "Once we start, there's no going back." Her voice was steel wrapped in silk. "I've lived through the Depression, a world war, and 50 years of Midwestern winters. I'm not about to let some two-bit con man and his worthless son steal what I've built. It's time the family sees what they've been choosing to ignore." The reunion was in 72 hours. Everything was in place. The evidence, the allies, the legal preparations. All we needed now was for Cliff to be himself, arrogant, violent, and absolutely certain he was untouchable. He had no idea that Grandma's sweet elderly neighbor was a decorated police officer. No idea that every financial transaction had been traced and documented. No idea that his threats were recorded and transcribed. Most importantly, he had no idea that the frail old woman he'd been exploiting had been playing a longer game than he could imagine. The trap wasn't just set, it was ready to snap shut. The morning of the reunion, rumors were already circulating through the Hart family grapevine. Cousin Janet called me at 7 a.m., her voice pitched with false concern. "Lena, people are saying you're planning to challenge Grandma's will, that you're upset about Cole getting his fair share. Is it true?" I kept my voice neutral. "I'm just looking forward to seeing everyone, Janet." But Cliff said, "I'll see you at the farm." By noon, my phone was buzzing with messages. Aunts wondering why I was stirring up trouble. Uncle Robert suggested I think about family harmony. Mom's text was the worst. "Please don't ruin this day for everyone," her text read. "Cliff is already stressed about hosting," the message continued. Hosting at Aunt Patricia's farm. The delusion was complete. I arrived early to help with setup and to check the projection equipment. Theo had designed the financial presentation to look like a family slideshow at first glance. The real data would only appear when I triggered the remote. Lena, Aunt Patricia hugged me, then whispered. Cliff's been telling everyone you're going through a rough patch, job stress or something. We are all supposed to be extra gentle with you. Perfect. He was laying groundwork to dismiss anything I might say as a breakdown. By 3 o'clock, cars filled the gravel drive. Grandma arrived with her neighbor friend, Lieutenant Knox, in a floral sundress and cardigan. Looking like everyone's favorite aunt. They settled into chairs near the patio doors, Knox positioning herself with clear sight lines to the entire yard. Cliff held court by the grill. Cole, at his side like an heir apparent, had coordinated with him, matching polo shirts, identical smirks, passing out beers and collecting loyalty. My mother orbited them, refilling platters and glowing with misplaced pride. Lena's here, someone announced, and heads turned. Cliff raised his beer in mock welcome. There's our career woman, he called out. Hope you brought your appetite instead of your audit reports. Polite laughter rippled through the crowd. I smiled, touching the recording device in my pocket. The afternoon crawled by in a haze of small talk and potato salad. I watched Cliff work the crowd, noticed how he kept checking on Grandma, how he'd steered 3 different conversations toward Cole's business success, the groundwork for his announcement. Around 5, he clinked a knife against his beer bottle. Family meeting time, he announced. Gather around, everyone. My pulse quickened. This wasn't planned. He was jumping the timeline. As you all know, Cliff began. I've been helping Evelyn manage her affairs, making sure everything's in order for the future. He gestured magnanimously toward Grandma. She's got some announcements about the family trust. Grandma smiled serenely. I do indeed. But first, I thought we could share some memories. Lena's prepared a little presentation about our family's financial journey. Cliff's face flickered with confusion, but he recovered. That's great. Family history is important. I stood, remote in hand. Thanks, Grandma. I've put together something I think everyone needs to see. The first slides were innocuous. Old photos of Grandma and Grandpa, the small hardware store that started it all. Then I clicked forward. Our family's success came from hard work and careful planning, I said. Grandma turned a modest inheritance into a substantial trust through decades of smart investing. Click. She's always been meticulous about documentation. Click. Which is why these recent irregularities are so concerning. The yard went silent. Cliff stepped forward. Lena, what are you? Let her finish, Grandma said quietly. I clicked again. Theo's charts filled the screen. Money flowing from trust to Cole's phantom company. Signatures side by side showing clear forgery. Cole's social media posts dated against withdrawals. $400,000, I said clearly, siphoned out through fraudulent authorizations and forged signatures, documented, traced, and verified by forensic accounting. The silence shattered into gasps and murmurs. Cole lunged for the laptop. You're lying. That's all fake. He shoved me hard, sending me stumbling. The laptop crashed to the ground. For a moment, everyone froze. Then Cliff charged. You ungrateful, he grabbed my arm, spinning me around. I told you to back off. Cliff, stop, my mother screamed. But he was beyond stopping, in full view of 40 relatives. He drew back his fist and drove it into my ribs. Pain exploded through my side as I hit the ground. That's enough, Lieutenant Knox's voice cut through the chaos. In seconds, she'd separated us. Badge out. Authority radiating from every line of her body. Sir, step back immediately. Cliff's face went white. Who the hell are you? Lieutenant Valerie Knox, Havenbrook PD. And you just assaulted someone in front of 36 witnesses. She looked at me. Do you want to press charges? I stood slowly, one hand pressed to my ribs. Yes. And I have a recording of him threatening me earlier this week. The yard erupted. Some relatives pulled out phones, recording everything. Others backed away from Cliff like he was radioactive. My mother stood frozen, reality crashing through her delusions. But we weren't done. Mara emerged from the house, legal documents in hand. I'm Ms. Hart's attorney. We have protective orders prepared and evidence of financial exploitation to present to the authorities. Cliff tried to run. Knox had him in cuffs before he reached the driveway. The fairy lights strung across Aunt Patricia's yard cast strange shadows as dusk settled over the chaos. Cliff stood by the patrol car Knox had called for backup, his polo shirt rumpled, cuffs glinting in the fading light. The crowd of relatives had split into clusters. Some huddled around Grandma, others maintaining careful distance from the unfolding drama. This is entrapment. Cliff shouted, struggling against the restraints. She set me up. Cole, tell them. But Cole had gone pale, backing away from his father. I don't know anything about forged signatures. Shut your mouth. Cliff snarled. Lieutenant Knox read him his rights with practiced efficiency, while another officer took statements from witnesses. My ribs throbbed where he'd struck me, but I forced myself to stand straight to meet the eyes of every relative who'd spent years looking away. Theo had salvaged the laptop, and now the evidence played on loop, damning numbers, forged signatures, the careful documentation of systematic theft. Several cousins filmed it with their phones, finally seeing what they'd chosen to ignore. $400,000, Uncle Robert muttered, shaking his head. Jesus Christ, Evelyn. Grandma hadn't moved from her chair, still serene, still in control. There's more, she said, her voice carrying across the yard. Lena, show them the will. I pulled up the final slide, the draft will Cliff had been carrying, ready for Grandma to sign, the one that would have given him and Cole control of everything. He planned to have me declared incompetent after tonight, Grandma continued. Cole would manage the trust with Cliff as advisor. They've already been in contact with a facility in Rockford. Isn't that right, Patricia? My aunt went white. He said you were getting confused. That it would be better if I was locked away while they drained everything my husband and I built. Grandma's voice could have cut glass. Yes, I heard all about their plans. Amazing what people say when they think you're too old to understand. Mara stepped forward with the protective orders. These documents ensure Mr. Raw and his son have no access to Mrs. Hart's property, finances, or person. We are also filing criminal charges for fraud, forgery, and elder abuse. You can't prove anything. Cliff yelled. Evelyn wanted to help Cole. She signed those papers willingly. Actually, Theo said quietly, we can prove everything. Digital forensics on the signatures, metadata on the documents, financial transfers traced to personal purchases, Theo elaborated. It's all here. Knox nodded to the backup officer. Take him in. We'll need the son for questioning, too. As they loaded Cliff into the patrol car, Cole made one last desperate play. Grandma, please. You know I care about you. This is all a misunderstanding. Grandma finally stood, Lieutenant Knox steadying her elbow. Cole, you posted a photo of your new Rolex the same day you withdrew $30,000 from my trust. You captioned it, Family takes care of family. Did you think I don't have Instagram? The yard went silent except for the sound of cicadas and Cliff's muffled cursing from the patrol car. My mother finally found her voice. Mom, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. You didn't want to know, Grandma corrected gently. There's a difference, Diane. And now you have a choice to make. The patrol car pulled away, taking Cliff to the Havenbrook County Jail. Cole was led to another vehicle for questioning. The relatives began to disperse, some stopping to apologize to Grandma, others slipping away in shame. Janet approached me hesitantly. Lena, I'm sorry. We should have listened. I touched my bruised ribs, already purpling beneath my shirt. Yes, you should have. As the crowd thinned, Mara and Theo packed up their evidence. Knox gave me her card. You'll need to come to the station tomorrow for a full statement. The recording from earlier this week will be crucial. Grandma squeezed my hand. Stay for a moment, dear. There's one more thing. When only immediate family remained, she pulled out a folder from her purse. The real will, updated last month with my actual lawyer, not Cliff's golf buddy. The trust goes into protective management with a neutral third party until I pass. Then it's distributed equally among my grandchildren, the ones who remember that family means more than money. She looked directly at where Cole had been standing. Greed makes people stupid, and stupid is expensive. The fairy lights flickered in the evening breeze, casting new patterns across the empty yard. Justice hadn't come with fanfare or speeches. It came with handcuffs clicking shut and truth finally spoken aloud. Tomorrow would bring statements and paperwork, trials and consequences. But tonight, for the first time in years, I could breathe without fear of the next family gathering. The reunion was over. The family, the real family, remained. The handcuffs clicked with a sound that seemed to echo across the yard, metallic and final. Cliff's face contorted as Lieutenant Knox guided him into the patrol car, his polo shirt bunched around the cuffs, his carefully constructed image crumbling with each second. You'll regret this, he shouted through the window. All of you. I'll sue every last. Knox shut the door, muffling his threats. She turned to me, professional and thorough. Miss Hart, I'll need you to come to the station tomorrow for a formal statement. Bring the recording from the grocery store incident and any other documentation. I nodded, my hand still pressed against my ribs where his fist had connected. The pain was sharp, but clarifying, physical proof of what he'd always been beneath the veneer. Mara appeared at my elbow with the protective order paperwork. This goes into effect immediately. He can't come within 500 feet of you, your grandmother, or any family property. She handed copies to several relatives. You're all witnesses. If he violates this order, call 911 immediately. The remaining family members stood in shocked clusters. Some were filming the police cars pulling away, others staring at the projection screen where Theo's evidence still glowed in the dusk. Cousin Janet had tears streaming down her face. $400,000, she kept repeating. How did we not see it? You saw what you wanted to see, Grandma said quietly. She'd returned to her chair, but there was nothing frail about her posture now. It was easier to believe I was becoming helpless than to admit someone you welcomed into the family was robbing me. Uncle Robert cleared his throat. Evelyn, I'm sorry. We should have. Yes, she cut him off. You should have, but apologies don't undo years of willful blindness. A second patrol car arrived for Cole. He'd been sitting on the porch steps, head in his hands, designer sneakers scuffing the wood. When the officers approached, he looked up with desperate eyes. Grandma, please, Cole pleaded. This is all Dad's doing. I didn't know about the signatures. I swear. Theo pulled up another slide on his laptop. Mr. Raw, this is your signature on the incorporation documents for Cole Force Consulting LLC. This is the bank account where trust funds were deposited. These are receipts for luxury purchases made within days of each withdrawal. Cole's mouth opened and closed like a landed fish. The officers helped him to his feet. The Instagram posts were particularly helpful, Theo added mildly, especially the one where you tagged the location of the Mercedes dealership, with thanks to family investments, time-stamped 2 hours after a $50,000 withdrawal. As Cole was led away, my mother finally broke her silence. She'd been standing frozen since Cliff's arrest, her face a map of disbelief and dawning horror. "Lena," she whispered. Oh God, what have I done?" I wanted to comfort her, but the words wouldn't come. She'd chosen him over me, over Grandma, over the truth staring her in the face. That betrayal cut deeper than any physical blow. Grandma spoke instead. "Diane, you have decisions to make. That man won't be in prison forever. You need to decide who you want to be when he gets out." The projection screen went dark as Theo packed up his equipment. The financial evidence had been submitted to the prosecutor's office, copies distributed to the family attorney, backup secured in multiple locations. The paper trail was irreversible now. Knox returned from her patrol car with an evidence bag. "Ms. Hart, I'll need the recording device you're carrying. Chain of custody for the earlier threat." I handed over the device along with my phone containing the grocery store recording. She labeled everything carefully, methodically. This was just another case to her, but to me, it was vindication of every gaslit moment, every dismissed concern, every time I'd been called difficult for seeing the truth. "One more thing," Knox said, producing a camera. "I need to document your injuries." As she photographed the bruising on my ribs, several relatives turned away. "Good. Let them be uncomfortable. Let them see what their silence had enabled." Mara gathered the remaining family members. "Mrs. Hart has asked me to inform you all that effective immediately, any family financial matters will be handled through the trust's appointed administrator. No exceptions, no special favors, no loans that are really gifts. Anyone attempting to pressure or manipulate her will face legal consequences." Furthermore, Grandma added, steel in her voice, "I've instructed my banks, investment advisors, and attorney to flag any unusual activity. Every check I write, every document I sign will be verified by multiple parties. I may be 91, but I'm not dead yet, and I won't be treated like I am." The message was clear. The era of exploitation was over. As the police cars disappeared down the country road, their tail lights fading into darkness, I stood in the wreckage of what had been a family reunion. Tables were still laden with untouched desserts, chairs overturned in the chaos, and the fairy lights now seemed garish against the reality of what had transpired. But I felt no regret, only relief, sharp and sweet as the evening air. The click of those handcuffs had been the sound of justice, finally served. The yard stood empty now, except for immediate family. The fairy lights swayed in the evening breeze, casting shifting shadows across abandoned plates and overturned chairs, evidence of the reunion that had become a reckoning. Grandma rose from her chair with more strength than anyone had seen in years. She walked to where I stood, still holding my bruised ribs, and took my face in her weathered hands. "Thank you," she said simply, "for seeing me, for fighting when everyone else chose comfort over truth." Behind her, the last police car's tail lights disappeared into the darkness, taking with it 5 years of manipulation and lies. The click of those handcuffs still rang in my ears, such a small sound to mark such a massive shift in our family's foundation. My mother approached hesitantly, mascara streaking her cheeks. "Lena, not tonight, Mom," I said quietly. "Tonight, I just need to know it's over." She nodded, understanding that some bridges would take time to rebuild, if they could be rebuilt at all. Theo finished packing his equipment, the laptop that had displayed the evidence now safely stowed. "The prosecutor will be in touch within 48 hours with what we've documented," Mara said. "Cliff's looking at serious time. Cole might get a plea deal if he cooperates." Mara added, The protective orders are permanent unless a judge says otherwise. The trust is safe. Your grandmother's safe. You're safe. Safe? Such a simple word for such a complex victory. As family members began to drift away, some paused to squeeze Grandma's hand or murmur apologies. Aunt Patricia hugged me quickly before leaving, whispering, "I should have listened." Uncle Robert just nodded, shame evident in his slumped shoulders. They'd all played their parts in enabling Cliff's control through silence, through willful blindness, through choosing the easy lie over the difficult truth. But tonight had shattered those comfortable delusions. Grandma turned to address the remaining relatives one final time. "Let this be clear," she stated. "I'm establishing new rules for this family. No more secrets. No more looking away when something feels wrong. And absolutely no more treating my age as an invitation for exploitation." She pulled out a folder from her purse, the real will, prepared with her actual attorney. "My assets will be managed by a neutral third party until my death. Then they'll be distributed equally among grandchildren, who understand that family isn't about money. It's about protection, truth, and standing up for each other when it matters." The night air carried the scent of cooling barbecue, and justice served. Tomorrow would bring paperwork, statements, the slow grind of legal proceedings. There would be family fractures to navigate, relationships to either mend or release. But tonight, in this moment, I stood in my grandmother's yard, knowing I'd kept my promise. I'd never again let anyone chip away at my dignity. And I'd extended that protection to the one person who'd always seen my worth. "Lena," Grandma said, taking my arm. "Stay for tea. I think we've earned a quiet moment." As we walked toward the house, leaving the chaos of the reunion behind, I caught my reflection in the patio door, bruised, but not broken, vindicated, but not vindictive. The fairy lights continued the gentle dance, but now they illuminated truth instead of deception. The reunion was over, but the real family, the one built on honesty and protection rather than manipulation and greed, was just beginning. Inside, Grandma put the kettle on, and we sat at her kitchen table like we had so many times before. But now, there were no more secrets between us, no more pretense, just two women who'd refused to let a con man rewrite their story. "You know," she said, pouring the tea with steady hands, "your grandfather would have been proud. He always said the Hart women were fighters. Tonight, you proved him right." I smiled, raising my cup to touch hers. We both did. The click of china was soft, nothing like the harsh snap of handcuffs, but in its own way, it was just as final. Justice had been served, the family protected, and the truth finally set free. The revenge was complete, not in the arrest, not in the public humiliation, but in this quiet moment of peace. We'd won not by stooping to Cliff's level, but by rising above it with evidence, law, and the unshakable bond between a grandmother and granddaughter, who refused to be victims. 10 years I'd waited for justice. It had arrived not with vengeance, but with handcuffs, truth, and the simple power of women who'd had enough. Your experiences and perspectives make this community special.